just when you thought it was safe to put your neck back in a noose. Hi guys, so even though I really enjoyed the first Gallows film, I was somewhat apprehensive about going back for a second one for two reasons. Firstly, the story was neatly wrapped up after one film. There really wasn't any scope for a sequel. And secondly, I learned at some point that the Gallows Act 2 was not going to be found footage like the original film was. Now, what other franchise can I think of which started off with a found footage film and then moved to a more normal sequel? Oh, I know, Blair Witch, and look what a complete disaster that turned out to be. I also noticed a clue in the home release for the Gallows Act 2 that maybe things wouldn't be as good this time around. So the first film had a Blu-ray. When I went to buy the second one, I could only find a DVD release. So if there's a third Gallows film, is it just going to be released on a white label, on the black market or something? There is some good features on the DVD release of Gallows Act 2 though, to be fair. So there were many signs that this wouldn't be as good as the first one, but I have to report it's actually a pretty good film against all the odds. I think it helps that the same two directors from the first film have come back to this one. I mean, the first film was their baby and they wouldn't want to just, undermine all that good work by churning out a shoddy sequel. I think if an outside contractor had been brought in, it could have been a case of, oh, you want a quick Gallows sequel? Sure, I'll churn something out, but thankfully that's not the case. So the story for this sees Charlie, the ghost from the first film. He's moved away from the school theatre setting. He's now out in the wide world, and anybody can summon him just by reading a passage from the Gallows play script. When I say summon him, I don't mean to be their friend or do their bidding or whatever. If you summon him, he's going to come after you and haunt you and kill you potentially. But there are people on the internet who have somehow found out about the events from the first film and are summoning Charlie. There's this thing called the Charlie Challenge. Now, I'm not sure if this is to try and just summon Charlie and make him come after you, or if the challenge is to summon him, make him come after you, and then survive him somehow. I was a little bit unclear about some of the internet stuff going on in this film. It does tend to take place mostly in the background. What we focus on is the character of Anna Rue, played by Emma Horvath. She unwittingly summons Charlie because she's got one of these YouTube channels where it's a bit unfocused. She just makes a completely different video each time. And when this film starts, she randomly decides to do a kind of supernatural video where she tries to summon the ghost of Charlie because she's heard about it. She probably doesn't think that it's going to work, but it does. So for the rest of the film, she is being stalked by this ghost. It's trying to kill her and she's in big trouble. And because she posted the video online of her summoning the ghost, there may also be a human element from these dodgy websites sort of coming after her as well. I'm going to roll on a little bit and talk about Emma Horvath because she is absolutely terrific in this film. I mean, she is the glue which holds this film together. She's in virtually all of the scenes because the whole film is centered around her. But her performance is unlike most of the performances you see in very low budget horror sequels. There's this one scene in the second half where she's having this emotional heart-to-heart with her sister, and honestly I was like this. Well, maybe not that bad, but it's a really terrific performance. Her character is the sort of sickly sweet, happy-go-lucky girl next door type, which can be annoying if they're presented as being too perfect. But this Anna Rue character does have flaws, and it's those flaws which actually kick this film into gear. So Anna Rue has just moved schools at the start of this film, which is a bit odd because she's right at the end of school. She's trying to get this drama scholarship, which would be a massive thing for her. But she's also got this budding YouTube career. It's as if she's hedging her bets in case one of these career choices doesn't quite work out. But she's got this flaw in her character where she jumps into things without properly preparing for them or researching what it is she's meant to be doing. So she calls upon the ghost of Charlie when she hasn't really looked into it properly, and that is her downfall throughout this movie. But even when she's in drama class, she shows the same trait. She volunteers to do this monologue in front of the whole class which I'm guessing you're supposed to have prepared for, but she clearly hasn't prepared properly, and she makes a bit of an idiot of herself. And I guess that's another flaw of hers, actually, that she readily embarrasses herself in this movie at various points. I would say that this is actually one of the film's biggest negatives, because there are one or two scenes in this which are just cringeworthy, watching Anna Rue just make an idiot of herself. So there's this other scene later on in the film where she's in the library and she's watching this character committing suicide. It's a touching scene, it's an emotional scene, but instead of just following the stuff on her screen and being anxious about it in silence, she has to make a scene in front of all these strangers going, she's committing suicide, oh my God, and stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's just... I'm totally the opposite from this girl. I will go to great lengths not to embarrass myself in public, but it's just a thing that this girl seems to do. And she's got this weird thing as well. This isn't so much a flaw this time, but it's a very skilled part of the writing, actually. She carries around this DVD of this old film from the 80s. It's sort of like a cross between Flash Gordon and Labyrinth. It's a really cheesy film. And if she's having a hard day or whatever, she'll just put this DVD onto her portable player and just watch a couple of scenes from this film, and it'll inspire her to come back to life and face the rest of the day. And I've never seen this trait in a horror character before. I thought it was really cool, and I could identify with this because I think a lot of us who are into films have become a fanboy or a fangirl of something at some point in our lives, and have, you know, put a poster up on our wall of a certain film that we really, really love. And that is what Anna Rue is doing here. And I thought it was a nice little thing that they put in there. Now, it might seem like I'm talking about this character a lot rather than talking about the actual horror of the film, but honestly, this whole film is based around this girl. This film is not really a straight sequel to the stuff that happened in the first film. It doesn't really expand upon Charlie as an entity, or expand upon anything that happened in the first film, really. This is a film about a completely different person. It's about her downfall through not really having much of a support base, and the fact that she doesn't quite use social media in the right way. It's kind of a film to show people as a kind of danger signal as to what can happen to young people in the modern world. The stuff to do with the gallows and Charlie is just kind of the means that sort of brings her down. It's a secondary thing. It's there. It's just so we can call it a Gallows sequel, but it is actually more of a spin-off. Most of the scares in this take place at the house which Anna Rue shares with her much older sister. They're very much of the Insidious mould, or something like The Conjuring, you know, lots of slow camera pans and then a big jump scare in the dark. There's characters just walking around the house with the lights off. And because Anna Rue's sister is a fashion designer, there's mannequins around the living room, which just makes the night scenes that little bit creepier. I watched the director's commentary for this, and the directors talked at length about how they tried to come up with new camera angles to give the audience scares they hadn't seen before. And I think for the most part, they succeeded in that. There's some really good stuff in this. And I'm slightly sad there weren't more scare scenes at the school, because they found a really good school location for this film. It's very spacious. It feels like there's a lot of space for each student. Much better that than a school where all the students are just packed in like sardines in every scene. The school theatre is much bigger in The Gallows 2 than it was in the first movie, which is saying something. So I wish there could have been some scare scenes at night in the school, but I guess you've got to go where the story takes you. One place the story does take the main characters, Anna Rue and her new love interest, Cade, is this small mental institution where Pfeiffer Brown from the first movie has been committed. She's the only returning character, and it does feel like she's been shoehorned into the story a little bit just so there is a bit more connective tissue. I mean, plot-wise, the appearance of Pfeiffer in this does very little to advance the narrative. All Pfeiffer does is act all psychotic for a few minutes, and then the characters leave without really having learned anything they didn't already know. But it's still nice to see Pfeiffer again. And she plays her one scene very well. She's actually better as a psychotic girl than as a scared protagonist. Now, I was talking about Cade briefly just then, the love interest of Anna Rue. His casting is really strange in this. He's played by a guy called Chris Milligan, an Australian. Now, I've seen this guy in this daytime soap called Neighbours for years. He plays this recurring role, and he's very good in that, but I'm really surprised that they cast him in this, because this is an American part. He's not the best at doing an American accent. And I worked out that he would have been about 29 when he would have filmed this, and he's meant to be playing like a teenager. The scenes where he's walking around the school look a little bit silly. He's way too old. He's like the size of an American footballer compared to Emma Horvath, who's really small, and he's trying to do this one-size-fits-all American accent. It's slightly awkward, although the scenes he's in away from the school are a little bit better. He does have a reasonable chemistry with Emma Horvath once the relationship gets going. And Cade is present in the finale, and that's probably the part of the film where Chris Milligan does his best acting. I'm not going to spoil the finale because I think a lot of people might not have seen this film. Sadly, it's not a finale which is as easy to understand as the first film was. There's instant gratification with the ending of the first film. My first reaction was, oh, that's really clever. With the end to the second film, I had to really think about it a lot more, which isn't ideal. But there's a great song which plays on the end credits. I do like it when a horror film finds a song, whether it's original music or not, which really fits in with the tone of the movie you've just watched. And with the Gallows 2, you absolutely get that. It's a great song to finish things off. So I guess it's time to wrap up then, and I'll say that I'm very positive about The Gallows 2. I think it's well worth your time. It works well as a horror film. It works well as a drama film. There are one or two little nitpicky things I would personally change. If only I could get on an editing console and sort those things out. But I have felt really enthusiastic about talking about this movie ever since I saw it a week or so ago. It's got some great performances, especially from Emma Horvath, some good scary scenes as well, a reasonable story, and I'm slightly sad that it didn't do the business of the first film. I think this movie could get lost as time goes on, which is a real shame. But if you've not given any of these Gallows films a try, I would absolutely encourage you to do so. They're pretty decent. And all that remains now is to get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give this. 1, 2, 3. 3.5 bloody axes out of 5 for the Gallows Act 2. That is a very commendable score, and that is only half an axe down on the excellent score that the first Gallows film achieved. Right, I'll be back soon with another video. In fact, my very next video after this is going to be the first of a brand new series. Ooh. Until next time, cheerio.